Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Hawaii Retirement Show. We're excited to bring you another episode. Before we jump in, Jason, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing good. Looking forward to this episode here. Kind of a two-part series on interest rates. Kind of a timely episode, but hopefully we make it a little evergreen with a little perspective on interest rates.
Awesome. So, with that, let's just jump into the topic. Today, we're going to talk about interest rates and how they might affect your assets or maybe the dollars that you have in your savings accounts. Um, so, Jason, why don't you kick us off with some high-level thoughts? What are you thinking?
Yes, I think part one of this discussion, right? We're kind of focusing on your capital or your assets and how that impacts interest rates for a return, right, on your capital or assets. And I think to kick us off, the kind of timestamp it is right now, the current Federal Reserve rate is hovering around 5.25%.
Yeah.
Uh, Historically, this is not too far off from what an average Federal Reserve rate is. Over the past decade or so, we've been fortunate enough to have some will say artificially low interest rates.
Yes.
But, I don't want to get into economics of that, but the interest rates have been very low
Mm-hmm.
for the past decade, 2%, 3%, right? That's good if you're borrowing money, not great if you're saving money, right? As
Exactly.
far as like savings account and CDs. But right now we're at 5.25%. Historical average is around 4%. So we're a little bit above that. But for some context, I think we made a note here. July 1981.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, it touched, just for a blip, 19% was the rate, which is crazy to wrap your mind around, right, Paul?
At 100%, I could not even fathom what that
Yeah.
looked like. Now, it was just a blip. If you look at the chart, it was a pretty sharp blip. Um, but man, could you imagine? Um, People hope to get that in an annual return. Could you
Right.
imagine if that was coming from your savings account? But anyway, yeah, that was just a blip. But I think it gives us, really good perspective on how historically interest rates have been very low, just like I said, in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
Um, but now we'll talk about now. What are some ways that we can use this interest rate, or how would someone, um, you know, look at their purchasing power or their dollars today? How would someone use these interest rates on the positive for our assets?
Right. And so certain things are, for most people, are set it and forget it. A lot of people's investments, right? 401ks and that kind of stuff. But there are some opportunities to review, savings accounts, certificate of deposits, money market accounts in times of changing interest rates, right? So CDs, and everybody knows this, it was kind of a joke for a long time. Most savings accounts, just 3 years ago, were paying, point, who knows, 0.1%. It's pretty
Yeah,
much nothing, right?
yeah,
But now you're looking at some of these high yield savings accounts as high as, what is the highest one we found? 5.6%.
yeah.
That's pretty significant, 5.6%. So there's opportunities if you have, funds for your, emergency fund or some savings that's earning, not as much in an account, and that, it's still liquid in these savings accounts. CDs a little less so, but there's opportunities there to take advantage of these interest rates outside of, investing in the market and bonds and whatnot. These CDs and savings accounts are great opportunities, not to mention US treasuries, right? T-notes, T-bills are all, rising with the tide and offering some pretty, significant interest rates that might perk the interest of somebody. I think a lot of what this comes down to is, every dollar has a use by date and has a purpose.
Yeah.
Even if that dollar is for, having fun, going out to dinner and going to the movies, it's tagged with a purpose. So it's good to review, what dollars do I have that fill a purpose that might, I might be able to move around to take advantage of some of these, you know, increasing savings rates and CDs.
Absolutely. And, I think so for me, and like this might be, how I look at, savings, emergency funds, and things like that. Like, we live in Hawaii, obviously. And for the most part, this isn't, a bash on local banks, but for the most part, local banks here aren't keeping up with, current rates in the savings account department, right? Not a lot
Right.
of high yield savings accounts here locally. Um,
Right.
so for me, like, you're going to find a lot of these high yield savings online, right? So you're going to find
Mhm.
them at your, online, but you can Google basically, and you'll find a bunch of different options. But, so for me, like, I would say like this could be a great opportunity, whether it's long lived or short lived, to park that emergency fund in a place where you can get, maybe you can get 4 or 5% interest on just the money that you're going to park there for an emergency. And I always say like try to, have about a 1 month need in your local bank here, and then put the next 2 to 5, depending on where you're
Mhm.
at, whether you have 3 to 6 months in an emergency fund, and put that money in a high yield interest rate. And hey, that could be, instead of it being, pennies on the dollar, right? It could be, hundreds of dollars depending on how much that is, um
Right.
so yeah, I think it's could be an opportunity for people to just say, hey, like what else is out there, um,
Sure.
and could I take the cash that I'm currently holding and don't plan to use, and not tie it up either, right? Like this is liquid, like you said, right?
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, just see what that can do for us.
Right. And I would say, when you Google or you search for a lot of these online banks, it just seems like there's an endless number of them with all different names that I can't keep track of all these banks. So I would say a big key in deciding where to park those dollars in those high yield savings accounts is really make sure that it's a bank that's FDIC insured.
100%.
Because I'm sure most of them all are, but there's so many out there with so many different names, it's hard to keep track. So that's just something to consider. And then the other thing I want to touch on is you mentioned we don't know how long this will last, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big unknown. There's a lot of speculation. You turn on the TV to any business, news channel, you're going to get all sorts of opinions on that, but we don't know, right? The interest rates, it looks like we're in for kind of a long haul, but nothing says that, we can't see a significant decline in interest rates in the short term, or, they could continue to rise for years to come. We just kind of got to sit back and let the, economic cycles and the Fed do their thing and see what happens there. So that's a big unknown and a big variable we can't really point our fingers on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would almost venture to say, you know, get ready for, this to be an extended period of time, whether it stays at 5.25 or whether it goes up or down slightly, like, short, obviously, again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know, but, short of any like major national or world global type of pandemic again, right? The
Right.
likelihood of it coming down for just the sake of coming down isn't high. In my
Right.
personal opinion.
Right.
But with that being said, like, um, we're still only slightly above like the average historically, right? So,
Right.
um, realistically, it's around where it probably should have been.
Right. Well, I think the Fed, what is the Fed? The Fed targets 2 to 3% is where they like to keep inflation, right?
Yeah,
And so that's kind of what they're doing is rising interest rates to kind of you know tamper down the inflation here. So yeah, even 2 to 3%. I mean, like you said, 4% is the historical average. So if you're in the ballpark of that, you can expect that to remain so, right? If it doesn't, that's outside of the average, right? If it goes down to 2%, that's 2% under the average, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on how interest rates can affect us on our assets or the savings accounts we have?
No, we're not giving any advice, just review, just some food for thought. Maybe review those funds sitting in the bank accounts and see if there's some better opportunities that fit your needs and goals. And we'll pick this conversation up on part two, talking about lending and loans and leveraging in the current interest rate environment.
Yeah, awesome. Super excited that. So yeah, have a great day, guys, and we'll see you on our next episode.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting their financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta, Paul McWilliams, and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial or Inspire Advisors. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration. And for Paul McWilliams, investment advisory services are offered through Inspire Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC.